Well, hello, friends, those of us who are here and everyone joining us online. It's great to get to be with you, and I must say the whole journey feels as present in me, and I imagine everyone else, as it did 2 weeks ago now, or whenever it was that we landed close to that we returned. So it's so wonderful to be able to come together and share about this experience. I don't think it would have meant a lot to everybody other than us, but right before we left, just happened to have been a very particular time, certainly in my life and in Saiganesh's life. Lakshmi was just going along as she usually does, working 2 very full-time jobs and doing everything she does. But I was busy packing up a 75-year-old's whole life and getting ready to move it to another house and continuing with my work, and Saiganesh was moving. So it wasn't that many days before we left that I just felt to write a little note to our group. There were 4 of us traveling. So it was small. I mean, we would have a lot to do with each other, and just celebrate the fact that we were about to begin a spiritual pilgrimage, because we were just rushing to get onto this trip. And then all of a sudden it came to me, we're going on a pilgrimage that could be, and hopefully will be, a profound experience. And at the end of that note, the words came to me, Master's last words of his life: my body is hallowed, my feet touch that sod. And it came to me, and it felt profound, not simply because Master was saying it, but because I had an anticipatory sense of what was about to happen. And I just would say that, we'll show a video that Lakshmi did, and we'll tell stories, and you'll see artifacts and different things from India. But it was right, so that it turned out to be such a deep and meaningful inward pilgrimage. So my hope tonight is that we can share in a way that will share the essence of what India is, of what India has to offer, and that it certainly keeps it alive for me, but that all of us can feel as if we've just visited India. That's what I hope can happen here. So let's begin with a prayer. We'll pray, we'll chant. We'll have a brief meditation, then we'll each share some, we'll show a little video, and then just see what kind of a discussion might happen. So let's pray. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, our beloved Guru Deva, Paramhansa Yogananda Ji, saints of all religions, beloved Swamiji, we lovingly bow before you all. Great masters of Kriya Yoga, help us to stay deeply in touch with and deeply attuned to all of the inspiration that you so lovingly shared with us as we traveled through Mother India. give us the ability to share that inspiration with all of our Guru Bhais, with all of our friends and our family, that they too might feel uplifted and held in your arms, knowing your love without a doubt, just as we did. Om, peace, amen. Let's meditate together now. We'll meditate for just about 5 minutes. So let's each take the opportunity to dive as deep as we can, as quickly as we can, as we prepare to share the inspiration brought to us through our gurus. Om. Peace. Amen. When we first sat down, Saiganesh said to me, just speak as long as you want. Speak for an hour if you want. I said to him, I'm not going to speak for an hour. Then when I was supposed to just be meditating right now, I was saying to myself, who were you kidding? You could speak for 3 hours about this trip. And I really feel that. I want to say that this trip actually came out of a conversation that I had with Saiganesh maybe 3 years ago. I don't know when his last trip to India was, but he had gone to Badrinath with Aryavan, and the whole trip just sounded, it just drew me in. And at that point, I thought Saiganesh and I would go alone to India and have this wonderful journey together, and we would do this hike up high above Badrinath, up to the, Badrinath's sacred, then the higher you climb, the more sacred it gets. Well, anyway, that was not meant to happen. He got married. That was a big thing. My knee decided probably didn't want to walk up that mountain, or so I thought, though it turns out I probably could have walked up that mountain. But anyway, so it wound up being the 4 of us. And I want to say that Saiganesh, I cannot imagine how many hours and hours and hours that turned into days and weeks that he put into planning every moment of this trip, so much so that I was worried before we went because I love spontaneity and I wanted to make sure I felt like I was really a part of India. I don't like to know exactly where I'm going to eat every meal and even sometimes where I'm going to stay. But that is what happened, and it turned out to be something I hope we can share some of it with you, but much of it is just beyond words. It was a magnificent spiritual pilgrimage that day by day, sometimes hour by hour, just went deeper and deeper. And, the 4 of us were together for the first 2 weeks, and then we split. And Saiganesh and Nivedita and Lakshmi went to Vrindavan. I didn't go with them. I stayed in the hotel and rested for a day and tried to integrate everything that had happened until then, and then had really the extraordinary blessing, thinking I didn't even know if I wanted to go at that point. Everything would just be down compared to where I was. This is where my head was. But I went off with Jyotish and Devi and their little group to Kolkata and Serampore, and then on to Mumbai. And each moment of the journey, I just kept thinking, is it possible that I could feel any more just, the words are just so strange to say, all of the words that keep coming, but more deeply connected with God, more just moving with pure inspiration. But that is what happened, and I think for everyone that happened, and everyone can share it. But the first 2 weeks of this trip that Saiganesh planned were exactly that. We started out by stopping in the town, and I forget the name of it, but it doesn't matter, where Neem Karoli Baba's ashram is. And, I've heard of Neem Karoli Baba since I was in my 20s because he was Ram Dass's guru, and I knew he was a great man. And then he was Krishna Das's, the chanter's guru, and you just hear all of the stories. Nothing prepared any of us for what happened there. We walked into the ashram, and I think all of us really were crying within 5 minutes. That is a true saint, Neem Karoli Baba. Whether he's an avatar or not is not up to me to say. But for those of you who don't know, he worshipped Hanuman. And when you're there and you're in the environment of the ashram, and there are people who are just there constantly, every minute of every day, in a small area chanting all of the chants, and people would just sit down and chant in various places the Hanuman Chalisa, a very long Sanskrit, right? Hindi piece, just honoring Hanuman. But even within being there an hour and a half, you start realizing that Neem Karoli Baba absolutely looks like a monkey. He is a monkey. He has monkey hands. I mean, I'm not kidding. It's the truth. He's so worshipped so deeply that manifestation of the divine that he became it. And so the start of the trip was just into a pure heart place of deep, deep connection with God. And I'm not going to tell any of the stories, but the beautiful story of Hanuman and his deep devotion to God and his willingness with his courage and his strength and all of what he did to show his love for God in so many ways. But you become it right there. And then I started thinking, I don't want to leave this ashram. This is day one. I don't care what else is planned. I never want to be anywhere but here. And then I found myself sort of making my way into this tiny little square where these three men were chanting. They were not used to anybody else sort of siding up next to them, sitting on the ground and just becoming part of their chant. But it was magnetic. It wasn't volitional. You know, it was just so powerful. And we left there, we were just all silent. I mean, that was just, as I said, day one, experience one. Now, I'm not going to go through every day of our journey, but it continued in that way, along the sacred rivers, climbing higher and higher, stopping many sacred places along the way. I mean, the next place that would be familiar to everybody was Babaji's cave. And I think I mentioned a couple of Sundays ago, we were meditating in that cave. You know, we always talk about spiritual pilgrimage, and we say, you will feel the vibration of the saint or the avatar that was there. So when you're in Assisi, you don't feel like you're in a place where Francis used to be. You feel like you're with Francis. He's there. He didn't go anywhere. His body went somewhere. I mean, other people went somewhere, and they changed it in whatever ways they changed it, but Francis is there. So when you enter into Babaji's cave, and then just a little way down from there is the plot of land where the palace was said to have manifested, this golden palace that we'll be talking more about tomorrow night. Well, when you're sitting there, you are very aware of the fact that Babaji is not there right now, though he's somewhere. But, I mean, in body, he's not there. But he's there. He's in the cave. And you feel him guiding you, speaking to you. And then I mentioned these people from YSS came. And it was just, we were just brothers and sisters on our way to God, chanting, because of course we know all the same chants. We love the same guru. They were so happy to see us, and us them, even though at one point Saiganesh said something like, the YSS people are coming. I have no idea how he knew. something, whether it was an inspiration or what. And I felt a moment of like, oh, darn, because we had the cave to ourselves. But the truth is, when they got there, they just uplifted and expanded the experience, feeling that depth of love of God and Guru and Babaji and the whole story. You don't have to explain it to anybody. You don't have to defend it. You don't have to prove why it's true. Everybody is living their lives in terms of the same story. And then again, walking down just a little way and sitting on this plot of land where the palace was, man, it's all beyond mind. So it literally blows your mind. You can't think about it. I'll just share one really profound experience. I do want to watch how long I speak. And as I said, every day was like this. But not that long ago, Ananda bought Tulsi Bose's house. So Tulsi Bose was the childhood friend of Yogananda, who he speaks so much about in the autobiography. And the house was apparently not in such great shape, but there's a woman now who's taken charge of the center in Kolkata. I mean, a center is really just forming and becoming. And her name is Diti, and she's an extraordinary soul. She is an artist. You could see her art on the internet, and you'll see that it's inspired. But she is the quintessential example of understatement and the perfect Indian lady. It's just a joy to be around her. And she just took it upon herself with the other people, they're all lovely, who are part of this center, to get this house really ready for Jyotish and Devi to come and visit. And Jyotish and Devi hadn't been there since a year before Swamiji died, when they were that last there with him. They hadn't been back to Kolkata. So this was quite the visit for everybody there. And I felt so blessed to be invited to go along, but I didn't want to get in the way too much because I see Jyotish and Devi a lot, and most of these Kolkata people had never even met them. So when we had this, we met at Tulsi Bose's house, and downstairs they were having a little satsang on the first floor. Little question answer, Jyotish and Devi would bless them. And I was just staying back. And somebody, I don't have a memory of this, but somebody took me by the arm, just like this, and said, "Come with me, Shanti." And they took me upstairs and showed me. Now, everybody could come and see this eventually. Here was the bed that Tulsi Bose and Master used to share. So they always slept together in this bed until Master started gaining too much weight. And he needed his own bed. I mean, it's true. It's how he tells it. And so there's their bed, and then in another room, there's Master's bed. And whoever it was, I mean, it must have been Devarshi or Jamal, who now, by the way, is Shankara. He got a new name, but anyway, it must have been one of them, but I don't remember it. Said, "You can stay here as long as you want. You can lay in Master's bed. You can sit on Master's bed. You can do whatever you want." Oh, they say, and by the way, here's a cabinet. They have all of the artifacts now nicely put away. And here's a cabinet with Babaji's trident that we read about in the autobiography, the trident that he walked around with. And they say to me, "Here, why don't you hold this for a while?" Now, you just can't make any sense of it. You can't, what do you say? "Oh, wow, this is great." No, this is so beyond great. Your hands are on the same trident that Babaji held. It's just, so when I say that so many of these experiences blow your mind, I mean it. It's so beyond logic or thought, and you just burst open. And I say you, I mean, I did, but I'm looking at all of you, and I know all of you, and I know that if you were placed on that bed, somebody said, hey, stay as long as you want, and by the way, here's the trident. Why don't you just hold on to it? Well, you have to move into a different realm to be able to absorb that. You can't absorb it in a logical way. You have to open your heart. You have to be receptive to divine inspiration. I mean, one has to be, or you could just sit there and be bored, I guess. But I mean, if you're going to have the experience, this is just an example of the journey. And then we went over to Master's house. I'm sharing much more about this part of it because Lakshmi or Saiganesh can share more about Badrinath, which, again, the whole trip was so beyond words. But then we went down to Master's house. I had never been there. I know many of you have. But suddenly you're in that room that we've all seen pictures of, that we've all read about. We've heard Master himself tell these stories. And again, you just were there. We're meditating for 2 hours in this tiny little space where Master spent how much time meditating. But again, you don't feel like he was there. You feel the grace and his energy, and it's like no meditation you've ever had before. Plus, sitting there with all of these relatives who know the stories, who just keep telling you stories, truly for hours in Tulsi Bose's house and in Master's house. Stories that are not written in the autobiography. They're nowhere else. And Master's, somebody will have to help me out here, but it was his great, great, great nephew, I think. So Sarita and Somnath, many of us have met them. They've been here. He just loves, Sarita loves to talk, and she talks most of the time, and she's delightful. But when it comes to telling these stories, the family history in Master's home, it's the only time he takes over. And telling the most amazing stories and going through a whole room full of photographs of who everyone was and how they played together and experiences that happened in their lives. I'm saying it and I'm thinking, if you haven't done this, please do it. If you've done it, do it again. Because it's just, I kept saying to everybody, do we have all of these stories recorded? Are there videos of them? Because when we were in Sarampur, we actually got to go into Sri Yukteswar's home. It's not been opened up before. No, I don't think any Ananda group has gone in. And right now, there's a question about who's going to get to buy that house, or if the house can be bought, because it could be owned by one relative who's living in it or by 30, and everybody's trying to figure that out now. And of course, YSS is going to bid a lot of money for the house, so there's a big question about it. But the young man who lives there, who's also a great, great, great something, he has no idea who Sri Yukteswar was. He didn't have one story to share. It's just his house he's living in. He's not on any particular path. So what's coming through, what is the man's name who was in Tulsi Bose's house telling us? You weren't there, but somebody, I can't remember his name, but we know him. Manoj, yeah, I'm sorry. Manoj telling us stories, or then some not. It's precious. It's so precious. You just want to make sure that, because those stories will go with some of these people. They'll just leave when these people leave their bodies. So anyway, I mean, it's impossible to not want to keep speaking, but I do want to say that I arrived in Kolkata from all of the inspiration of the first 2 weeks of the trip that had to do with the trip to Badrinath, which I'll let somebody else share about, which was the first amazing experience. I did speak some of it, but sitting for 3 hours in the most crowded temple I've ever been in, or probably ever will be in my whole life, not understanding one word that's being said, and yet receiving all of it. It's a profound way to learn and to absorb. And you know, what Saiganesh set up for us, I would say at least 10 Indian people here have said to me, even in India, many more now that I think of it, said to me, I've never even been to Badrinath. It's not a common, it's a journey to get up there. So it's not something that's a common thing to do, though it's a dream, I think, of most Indians to get there. Patty shaking his head yes. So, and again, we had to get up there. We already had so many experiences getting there. I'll stop speaking now, but I will say this. There's no real way to share any of this in words. And if I left people with nothing else, I would say, if you have the opportunity and you feel at all inclined, because the other thing about India that I'm not speaking about, because I got off the plane and I was just, it's not that I felt like I was home, but I was completely in tune. I just didn't feel shaken by India. But if that's not the case for you, India can assault you. It will just get you. The smells, the sounds, the people. It's an entirely different culture. What we think is rude, they think is commonplace. What we think is polite, they're looking at us like we're, a monkey ourselves. I mean, and never mind the monkeys, by the way, that is another story. The real monkeys, I mean. But if you're feeling drawn, do what you can do to line up with a pilgrimage, and hopefully a great pilgrimage, and just go there, because when you're there, that's where you're transported and where the inspiration comes and your heart is opened and you just can live in a state of love. And I cannot think of any other place on the earth where that happens. I just can't imagine. Where every person knows that everything around them is sacred. It's a given. Even if they're not people who talk about it or practice it, still they have 6 Ganeshes in their store and they're, screaming the name of God, which is what they love to do. And I mean, it looks very different than us, as I said a couple of weeks ago. But I mean, I can't say everybody, but I will say a huge percentage of the people in India really love God or Divine Mother or Ganesha or Krishna, whatever they want to call it. So it's a constant reminder of the truth of Dwapara Yuga is what it is. Really, it becomes alive for you in India. So let me just stop there.
Show the video first, maybe though. What do you think?
I think it would be good to show the video.
Yeah, let's show the video so you can have a visual idea of what we are talking about, and then we will share it.
hadn't seen it, so I'm going to come watch it.
Anandam prasannam jnana swarupam nijabodhrupam. Anandam prasannam jnana swarupam nijabodhrupam. Jogindra midyam bhavaruga vaidyam srimad gurum tvam aham namami. Jogindra midyam bhavaruga vaidyam srimad gurum tvam aham namami. Nalini talagata jalamati taralam tadvat jivanam atishaya chapalam. Nalini talagata jalamati taralam tadvat jivanam atishaya chapalam. Kannamapi sajjana sangati reka bhavati bhavanavataraniloka. Kannamapi sajjana sangati reka bhavati bhavanavataraniloka. Anandam anandakaram prasannam jnana swarupam nijabodhrupam. Anandam anandakaram prasannam jnana swarupam nijabodhrupam. Jogindra midyam bhavaruga vaidyam srimad gurum tvam aham namami. Jogindra midyam bhavaruga vaidyam srimad gurum tvam aham namami. Nalini dalagata jalamati taralam tadvat jivanam atishaya chapalam. Nalini dalagata jalamati taralam tadvat jivanam atishaya chapalam. Kannamapi sajjana sangati reka bhavati bhavanavataraniloka. Kannamapi sajjana sangati reka bhavati bhavanavataraniloka. Anandam anandakaram prasannam jnana swarupam nijabodhrupam. Anandam anandakaram prasannam jnana swarupam nijabodhrupam. Jogindra midyam bhavaruga vaidyam srimad gurum tvam aham namami. Jogindra midyam bhavaruga vaidyam srimad gurum tvam aham namami.
जय बाबा जी महाराज की जय बाबा जी महाराज की जय बाबा जी महाराज की जय
Nalini dalagata jalamati taralam tadvat jivanam atishaya chapalam. Kannamapi sajjana sangati reka bhavati bhavanavataraniloka. 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 Think ye in thy heart, lotus feet of thy Guru. Think ye in thy heart, lotus feet of thy Guru. If you want to cross the ocean of delusion, if you want to cross the ocean of delusion, shaming the white lotus in purity, shaming the white lotus in purity, beyond all duality, Guru image of Brahma, deliver us from delusion. Guru image of Brahma, deliver us from delusion. Think ye lotus in purity, shaming the white lotus in purity, beyond all duality. Guru, image of Brahma, deliver us from delusion. Guru, image of Brahma, deliver us from delusion. Think ye in thy heart, lotus feet of thy Guru. Think ye in thy heart, lotus feet of thy Guru. Lord Most High, our Heavenly Father, all our lives we dedicate to Thee. All our labors, all our joys and woes, all our pleasure, all our melody. Make us each a channel of thy peace. When in darkness, guide us from above. Where there's sorrow, may we sow thy joy. Where there's hatred, may we share thy love.
I don't know what to say after that. That was so beautiful. Thank you, Lakshmi. I mean, I was there for all parts of it, but still, it is so beautiful to watch. James, I think it's just me. Should I reconnect it if you want to mute it? It is so beautiful to see all of that, even for me. I know, this was an unusual trip for me because I was just thinking, even in the last few days that I've been back, that every time I'm in India, the time is pretty tight because I have a lot of things to do. But I don't think I've ever been in India like this time that I didn't have even a moment to pause. I don't say that with any regret, but it was just constant motion in a way that, if I thought about it, I would have foreseen, but it did just not occur to me until I was actually there, that it's going to take some time, even for me personally, to just process a lot of what transpired in those 4 weeks that I was there. Like Shanti was saying, we were together for about 15 days, and then we also sort of went our own ways and did a few things by ourselves. And, just to give you some of the details before I share the inspiration, we started with Babaji's cave, as Shanti was saying, and then we went higher up in the Himalayas. We went to Badrinath. We were there for about 3 days or so. And then we also trekked up to this cave called Vyasa's cave, which is where the Mahabharata was written. It's about 3 or 4 kilometers from Badrinath. It sounds very short, but at that altitude, you will feel that as a great distance. We had to drive and then walk into the mountains. And then we came down from the mountains and we were in Rishikesh for a few days. And then we spent a couple of days in this retreat called Ananda that, Lakshmi labeled. That's about an hour north of Rishikesh. And then we came back to Delhi, and then some of us went over to Vrindavan, and Shanti went to Kolkata. And from there, after that was over, Nivedita and I went on to go to Jaipur, and then I was in Varanasi for 4 or 5 days after that with my parents, and then I visited home for some time and was very, very busy taking care of some business. But it seems like a lot, and it was. I was just thinking as Shanti was speaking, just this timeless quality that one experiences when on pilgrimage. When you go to a CC, we say these things in past tense almost because of the limitation of language. This is where St. Francis experienced the stigmata, or this is where Babaji appeared to Larry Mashai. This is where the Vyasa wrote the Mahabharata. But we are tuning into a living presence. And it's interesting in India because somehow the culture, the setting, the whole backdrop reflects that timelessness. India is so chaotic and crazy. We were just in the Delhi airport, just in the second or third day that we were there. There's a Starbucks and we're sitting, and it's the same, more or less. I didn't have. They were trying things. It seems like the same menu and everything there. And then you're boarding a flight, and it all seems very familiar. And then within a couple of hours, you're just in the countryside, and then you're just traveling, and everything looks different. Somehow, everything feels timeless in this way because, even in the Indian culture, those of us that are, I'm looking at the room, and perhaps a lot of you watching online too, I'm sure, many of you are from India, so you can relate to this even more. Past and present and future coexist. I'm including future because it's a tricky thing. In India, time just warps, and it's so hard to describe. You feel like somehow you're in an ancient temple, and then you're walking out, and you're, in a Starbucks, and then it all just coexists so seamlessly, and it adds to that experience of how we experience time itself, of just how, Shanti was starting to say about Badrinath, and we went to this ceremonial washing of the deity, the idol. The idol in Badrinath, for those of you that don't know, you cannot generally see. It's a stone idol. It is said it's not carved. There are no chisel marks. And when you go during the day to visit to have darshan, you cannot really see the idol. It's covered in a lot of decoration, a lot of flowers and silk fabric and jewelry and all of that. The only time that we can see it is around 4 a.m. in the morning, when they actually wash the deity. And you can pay for the service and go into the sanctum and sit there for 4 hours as they do this. And as our priest friend in Badrinath was telling me that, he was saying historically, perhaps this is the most number of people that have even visited this town. He has never seen so many human bodies in that town because a lot of things have shifted. The pandemic itself, people have been holding back on traveling, and then, of course, the road conditions and all of that is better. Travel is more commonplace in India. People are traveling more easily. So just many, many changes, all leading up to this culmination of this enormous crowd, as Shanti was describing, the most crowded temple, and I can attest to that. Perhaps that's true even for me. I've probably visited every ancient temple everywhere in India. And sitting there, the Badrinath temple, the site itself is sacred because in Satya Yuga, that's where Narayana and Nara, these are two gods or characters, however you want to think about it. They're incarnations of God, they're avatars. They meditated there for thousands of years. Because in Satya Yuga, there was no activity. There are no scriptures written in Satya Yuga. There are no stories because people are just engrossed in meditation. All the scriptures and mythology, it all comes from Treta Yuga and Dwapara Yuga. And he's describing story after story, but I was thinking about that as Shanti was describing because he was not telling any of these stories in past tense. He was describing all of this in Hindi, but he was just saying, this is where Narayana meditates, this is what happens, and there is this, all the different deities, there is this shrine for this character from the Mahabharata. His name was Uddhava. He was a very, very great devotee of Krishna, that he actually looks identical to Krishna. And at the end of the story, Krishna tells him, I'm going to go to Badrinath, so you should come there, be with me. So there's a shrine for him. And then he's describing a historical incident, he's describing a mythical story from the scripture, but he's also describing something that happened yesterday because we landed there on the day right after the ceremony of Uddhava visiting this other village and his visit to Badrinath and all of this. The details are not that important, but the only point that I'm trying to communicate is just the nature of experience as you go through it, as you feel it, that there is a timeless quality to it. In superconsciousness, there is no time, there is no past, there is no present, there is no future. It all just combines into one whole. That is your own experience in this moment. And in some mysterious way, India facilitates that in a way that's better than anywhere else in the world, I feel. I'm not a world traveler. I've been to Assisi and all the sites associated with St. Francis, but that's about it. I've visited all the pilgrimage sites in Southern California. I'm very familiar with India. That in itself makes this a unique experience for me because I was not visiting any of these places for the first time. They're very familiar to me, they're anciently familiar to me. I've visited Badrinath and Vrindavan and Varanasi many times. And even through my little life, just watching these places shift in front of your eyes, it is pretty jarring in a way. Even for those of you that have visited India before, we spent some time with this new friend that we made in Badrinath, a priest, and he was just telling stories after stories of changes that are going to come about in the town and what's about to happen and this and that. And it was just, on one side, it was almost saddening of just losing something that's so charming and so beautiful, what you're used to. But I think on just a completely different level, you just get to see these places and what you are going there for. Just to think about the fact that Narayana and Nara have been meditating there however many thousands of years ago Satya Yuga was, I don't know. 4,000-5,000 years ago, Vyasa wrote the Mahabharata there. The cave was there. The cave was there when he wrote it. And then how many men, how many times, how many saints, how many avatars perhaps have these places seen, and all the tides of time that have gone through. And we are there in a particular moment through our own karmic situation that we get an experience visiting these sacred sites. But for me, it added a certain perspective of even just watching this. Many of you from India perhaps might relate to this. Just watching the changing shades of India through the last 20, 30 years of our meager existence, to see these temples just shift, but also just to see things that don't shift. The essence of what holds all of this together, the depth of the culture, as Master describes, as Shanti was saying, where Himalayan caves, the Ganges, and men dreamed God. That's really what we are going there for. Of the soil that is saturated with the presence of God, but more importantly, just people that have found God. Because everywhere the world is saturated with the presence of God. But what makes India special is these thousands of souls that have come before us, many that we know as saints and avatars, and perhaps many we will never know. Of all their meditations, all their devotion, you feel that. And that is not just in these sacred sites. Every temple, every corner you turn, India is so mysterious. I was reading some thing written by Master. I had not read it before. He was talking about the benefits of energization, and in one place he just says, it makes you better in dancing and wrestling. And I was reading that and thinking, there's perhaps not a single dancing bone in my body, and it's not an objective that I would consciously pursue. But somehow it came to my mind because traveling in India is a dance. It's a real dance because, Shanti was saying the same thing. You cannot try to control it. And those of you that have been there know this because you just don't know what experience is going to present itself when. You just don't know even the expectancy of it. The material plane is very unlike the West. It is not conducive. It does not just bend and fold to human whims. It is very unrelenting. It is overwhelming at times, whether it's the landslide that has stopped you above Rishikesh for 2 days, or whether it's the pollution, whether it's something happening here, whether it's the roadblock or the weather or whatever it is. The material plane is just a lot more unrelenting than it is in the West, of course, overwhelmed with the population and the number of people that are trying to fit into these spaces. And as you move through it, it is a dance. Maybe energization prepares us for it, and it certainly does. It is a dance because you just flow with it. It's not something you can understand. You have to feel it from inside. Dance steps cannot be intellectualized. You don't know why you're turning your hand a certain way, why you're putting your feet a certain way. You have to feel it from inside. And in a way, whether or not you like it, India forces it upon you. You have to get into the flow. If you resist, it'll just whack you on your head. and just push you in this other direction, and then you take your turn again. It sounds abstract what I'm saying, but for those of you that have traveled and who are about to travel, you will realize that when you're in India. I just don't know. Nivedita and I were in Jaipur just for a couple of days after all of this, and the objective of being there had nothing to do with pilgrimage. We were not looking to go to any temples, and I didn't even know. Suddenly one evening, we were with Arivan and Ishani, and we just found ourselves in this very ancient temple of Krishna, and then there were all these stories being told of how sacred it was, and we went there, all the curtains were closed, and we were just standing there. It was crowded, and the men and women were separated by a lot of distance. So we were not even together. Arivan and I were on one side, Nivedita and Ishani were on the other side. And when the curtains opened, the noise of the bells and the clinging and all of that was just so overpowering, you thought for a moment you were going to go deaf. And it was so deafening that I almost sort of lost my sense a little bit. I'm not exaggerating, when you hear such loud sounds. But out of nowhere, the curtain opens, and I'm looking at this statue of Krishna, God knows how many thousands of years old, and then there is an experience that's waiting there that I was not even expecting. And that's just one example, but India has this quality to it. You just don't know what's going to happen in the next hour, what's going to happen. I'm really not exaggerating. For those of you that have traveled, you perhaps have experienced it yourself. But it is that openness to Mother India herself. It's just she takes charge and she guides you. And everywhere we experience that in pilgrimage. Lakshmi and I went to Vrindavan. I just wanted to say this because there's so much to share about what's happening there. I did not feel like it would be the right context to necessarily talk about too much, because not just about my personal experience, but also Ananda's work there, the future of it, and how any of you who wish to and who desire to can plug in or stay engaged. I'll be talking about that perhaps next week, and I'll write a note on Google Group. And for those of you that are interested in learning more about the work there and what's happening with the widows and Ananda's own presence in that town, I'll share a separate satsang about that, because I want to share a lot of details of what all has been happening, and especially for those of you, if you want to visit, if you want to stay connected from here, there are many ways that I'll share. That was one of the most profound experiences for me in this whole trip. Just being there to watch, Master's teachings. I myself forget sometimes that my own exposure to this path and the teachings has always been in the English language and in the context of receiving it more from this depth that I found here at Ananda in the West. And Ananda has this quality to it, This was founded in the Master came to the US. The entire work was founded in the US, and of course, Swami himself, and all of this started here. And then to see it in that different cultural context with these widow mothers and these people that are serving there that don't know the language, that don't have any of this context, how do they relate to Master? What does it mean to them? And just to hear those stories just sort of takes you outside of your own routine realm of whatever you imagine life to be, spirituality to be. It humbles you in a way. A lot of experiences, like Shanti said, we could all sit here and share stories for hours. It is sometimes so poignant and sometimes just heart-wrenching. Just like any other country, India, is not as wealthy as the West, but more so the wealth gap just, as is the situation in the world today, it just widens. The poor are becoming poorer, the wealthier are becoming wealthier, the wealthier becoming wealthier, and you get to watch that also. That's one of those stark experiences that we have going through India, what money means, what this amount means to this person. It's just like even 10 rupees or, which is like 10 cents. What does that mean to somebody? What does food cost? And in Vrindavan, you get to experience a lot of that very up close, of just stepping into an entirely different reality that would be so alien to us. And yet, you get to see the expression of Master's teachings, even amongst the widows. I did not know this until I was there, that the widows themselves, I thought there were some devotees who were doing the work and they were serving the widows. But I did not know the devotion that the widows felt for Master. That was the sweetest thing to watch, because they don't know anything other than Bengali. They haven't probably read the autobiography of a yogi. They haven't, taken lessons in meditation. I don't know what they've been taught. They energized, though, interestingly. But to watch that, it is so heart-touching. What I wanted to say is, it gives you a perspective in knowing how little it takes to be happy, to see the simplicity of life itself, which only a country like India can offer. It's just so hard to see in the West, again, because the material plane is somehow more willingly cooperative here. That's the only way I think about it, because it's not just the wealth, it's just the traffic, the weather, it's just like it touches 90 and everybody feels like they need air conditioning, and we are so used to things being comfortable in a certain way. It's just like you can go to Amazon, and I did not know until I went home in Chennai that Prime shipping in India is not one day. And you never know when you order something on Amazon when it's going to show up, whether it's going to show up in 2 weeks or 2 months. It's just, I've been away from India for more than 12 years, so every time I go there, I learn so much about what has changed and what's still the same. I feel as alien as most of you might feel when you go there. But again, beneath all of it, you just experience the essence of being human. Just when you are with these people, Shanti had all these beautiful experiences, which I was hoping she would share, just with these women with whom you may not even share a common language, just being present with people. There is a certain heart connection that becomes possible. It's just not as common here in the West, that you move in that way, that the way people smile, the way people greet, when you say something, what it means. And all of this is culturally different, but also there's a sweetness to it. There's a heart quality to it that's so endearing. So, like I said, I could go on forever, but I'll stop there. And I'm sure Lakshmi will have her perspective and experiences to share. Would you like this, Lakshmi? Is it better? Yeah.
Shanti just said, "You're not even Jewish." Still like to use my hands. Well, the benefit of going last is that there's not much more to be said. That, these stories that have been shared and the energy and the vibration, I don't have to do much to bring us to an elevated state, because we're already there and we can feel it. But so I won't be saying anything new, but it comes out a little differently when it comes through the filter of each one of us. And as I was sitting here just thinking about it, I have the unusual definition or experience of I'm the only one sitting up here for whom going to India was my first time. So I really had no idea what to expect. And people lovingly prepare you for India. They come up and they tell you all of the stories. And I've heard everything from, you'll just sit down and cry the moment the plane touches the ground, to as soon as you step out of that plane, you will be assaulted. Don't look at anyone. Don't talk to anyone. Pick up, so I'm there, and I tend to be a worrier by nature. I like to think that if I worry about the worst possible case scenario, anything else that happens in there will be okay, and we'll get through it. So, the beautiful thing is I got to have both of those experiences. The moment the plane touched down, I could feel it, and the tears come before you're even landing on the ground, because you're entering something that is sacred, and that your soul understands on a level the mind could never even begin to understand. And then you step out of that plane, and there are 100 people looking at you, talking to you, and don't touch your bags, don't take my bag, well, where's my bag? It's just both of these realities. And I was realizing throughout my journey in India, there are two ways to show up to India. And the first way is to show up as yourself. And that's that tiny bubble, or that huge bubble of self-definitions that we're all carrying around with us. Our likes and our dislikes, our wants, our desires. So much of what Shanti and, let me just pull this up a little. So much of what Shanti and Saiganesh have already been sharing. And as they've expressed so beautifully, if you show up that way, India just takes you and just strips it all away from you. You know, the very first temple, this was the first time I'd really spent any time in Hindu temples before. And when we were in Badrinath on the very first day, and here you are, and there's thousands of people all around you, and we go to this little shrine of Lakshmi, and I think, okay, great, yeah, let's tune into Lakshmi. She and I have a connection. And so I'm sitting there closing my eyes, just trying to tune in and feel it and let go of all of what's happening around me. And right up above you, there's 4 little bells, and people are just slamming the bell, one person after another, and you know, the nervous system's getting more and more intense, and I'm just thinking, what are we doing here, you know? But as soon as you start to let go of that and you realize that that chaos is the very nature of the devotion that you can feel there, and that beneath all of that is the sound of Om, is just that cosmic vibration of love. And just as Shanti was saying, you know, you can't set foot anywhere in India and not feel God's presence. It's very different. It was a different experience for me than being in Jerusalem. I had the great privilege of going on the pilgrimage in 2020 to Jerusalem, and when you're walking through that city, you feel God everywhere, because God has been worshipped there, but in a very different way than in India. You know, in India, it's the same experience. We were driving down the mountains from Babaji's cave, and Saiganesh was saying, oh yeah, well, this is the mountain, and it's sacred because when Hanuman was carrying the herbs back to help Lakshmi, to help Lakshman, sorry. And he carried the whole mountain, and this is where a piece of the mountain fell off, and you're sitting on this mountain now. And so not only is it that the land itself is rich with that vibration of the divine, but every single person that you encounter, for the most part, is in tune with that energy. And that was the difference between Jerusalem and India. You can't step anywhere on this sacred ground and not feel caught up in that devotion, and not even begin, you know, by the end of the trip, you begin to even love it. It's a beautiful story. I hadn't heard Saiganesh's story about being in Jaipur and being in this temple and having an experience with Krishna and the bells. But you begin to realize that all of that is a part of the process, because that's how devotion is. Why wouldn't we get up and ring bells and scream and chant for God? It's the same thing as we were experiencing in the Abhishek. You know, I actually, at one point, we can't even describe to you how many people were in this tiny little room. And everybody's pushing you, and you don't actually know what to do. At one point, I turned to Saiganesh and I said, I'm leaving, because everyone's fighting to try and sit down. And I said, in my mind thinking, I'll just go sit outside. This is too much. But as soon as everybody settles down and everybody begins to watch this process and experience the process, I mean, I literally felt like I was falling into love with the people around me. I said to Shanti at the end, I just wanted to start hugging everyone who was around me, and they're sitting their foot's on your knee, and then you kind of move and put your knee on their foot, and you become brothers and sisters so quickly. But the experience, that physical closeness, is actually an expression of something much deeper that's happening underneath it, which is an experience of being in love. And that was the most beautiful part. You know, we live in a world where we, in each one of us sitting in this room and watching online, we are actively always trying to spiritualize every experience in our lives. And we have to remember that here. But in India, it's actually the opposite. Because God is so present, because that experience of love is so pervasive, you can be shopping through Rishikesh. And like Shanti was saying, you know, as I was putting this together, there were so many videos and photos, of course, that had to be left out. And I took this one little video walking through the streets of Rishikesh where we're shopping, but it's just idol after idol after idol, everything that you can see, hundreds and thousands of little statues of every incarnation of Divine Mother and of God that you can imagine. And it's a spiritual experience. So it's actually the opposite. Whereas here, we have to try so hard to spiritualize every experience in our life. In India, it would be work not to feel that's the spirit and the love and the joy underneath it all, because God is just present everywhere in the midst of that. And so to come all the way back to what I was sharing at the beginning, there are two ways to show up in India. And the first one is as yourself. And if you show up as that collection of self-definitions and likes and dislikes, just like Saiganesh and Shanti were sharing, India just takes over for you. And she'll tell you what you're going to do, where you're going to be. She'll strip you of all of those desires. But if you show up and you feel that bhav and that vibration underneath it, you realize, just as Saiganesh was sharing, that India's taking you somewhere. She's taking you somewhere so much deeper. You know, I was telling a lot of people before I left that I was anxious about leaving work right at the beginning of the school year with my students and all of that. And I just kept having this feeling that I was going to get left in India. And I had so many dreams. I spared these two, but dreams about all of them getting on the plane. And I'm just sitting here left in India all by myself and not really sure what to do. And of course, I realized long before getting onto the plane and taking the trip that feeling is accurate, because something did get left in India. Part of us always gets left whenever we go on any of these deep pilgrimages, whenever we experience the divine so powerfully. And it's that surrender that is the magic. It's the same thing that we've been hearing all evening. But that's the power, and that's what I experienced more than anything, sitting by the Ganges and just watching her flow. You realize that as that energy is moving, as she's flowing down in the river, and all of that power that's present there, she's taking you with her. She's guiding you. She's coaxing you into a deeper and deeper state of consciousness if you're willing to go with her. So you could look at it and see a muddy river and see all of the dirt and grime and everything that's around you, or you can feel God coaxing you, calling you, drawing you somewhere that you can't even begin to imagine that you could go, because the mind couldn't even begin to understand it. And soon you find that you're just living in an experience of love, because when God is worshipped with that kind of devotion so deeply by everybody who's around you, you can't help but be swept up into that feeling of love. And a cacophony of bells sounds like a call to God, and a muddy river flowing down. You know, I still remember the first day I got a cut on my foot very early on, and of course, as you guys know, I'm a worrier, so I was thinking, should I go into the water? Should I do this? Should I do that? You know, what's going to be safe? And then you stand by the river, and Mother Ganga just says to you, what are you doing? Get in the river. You know, what do you let go of all sense of self, all sense of worry, all sense of who we are, and that feeling of love just sweeps you up, and you realize it's the only thing that matters. And that's what we're all chasing. We're chasing it in every meditation, and every chant that we sing, and every interaction that we have with the people that we love. That's what we're all chasing. And in India, it's just waiting for you if you're willing to show up as your higher self. You're willing to show up and just say, as we've been hearing, yes, take me wherever you want to go. And suddenly you find yourself sitting on Master's bed holding Babaji's trident. It's unimaginable. And whether it's something as powerful as that, or sitting by the Ganges with 1,000 other people, you feel that same devotion, because when we get to the very essence, when we distill down to the very essence of the experience, it's all the same. Holding Babaji's trident, dipping our toe into the Ganges, ringing a bell at Lakshmi's altar, it's all the exact same thing. There is no difference, because it's only God, it's only love. So I think that's enough to share.
I just want to say, Ananda, Mumbai, very different than what we've been talking about, but I think I've shared, at least with a lot of you, that we were in Serampore, and I was supposed to fly back to Delhi and spend a day and then come home. And Narayani looked at me across the dinner table and said, I just had this thought. Why don't you come to Mumbai for a day? And I said to her, that is crazy. I mean, I had hotel reservations, plane reservations. And my hotel reservation was that I was going to pamper myself in a very fine hotel in Delhi for 24 hours where Swamiji used to stay. But I said to her, that is so crazy, but why not? And so anyway, I went to Mumbai, and a lot to say about that too that I won't say, but here's what I want to say. They've moved themselves out of Mumbai, where Narayani and Shurjo lived for 4 years. That is unimaginable to me, but nonetheless, they did it. And now they live out on what they call the island. It's not really an island like we think of it, but it's a road that even most of the taxi drivers don't necessarily want to go down, but you go there. And then they're in this new development, and it's really lovely. I mean, I actually call it the country club. And it is a little like that. I mean, there's a big gym there and a gorgeous pool, and it's very spread out. And anyway, it's not what's important, but what's important is that because, I'm going to say Narayani is who she is, and because Swamiji lived with her as he lived with her, I don't know, I'm going to very quickly get in over my head here, but she is so beautifully channeling Swamiji there. She is just like an open, just like a way that Swamiji could land in Mumbai, so that when you're there, it is so easy. And of course, it's not the only place. We could say that about the village and about our own Ananda Palo Alto with Asha, who spent so much time with Swamiji, and others who were sort of raised by Swamiji. But I think because it's in India, it's a unique experience. It feels it's exactly him. It's India, but it's all of the elegance that Swamiji loved, that exquisitely fine sense of things, of furniture, of lighting, of landing in this new development. I mean, at one point I started to say to her, Swamiji would love this, but before those words came out, I realized Swamiji manifested this through her for the Mumbai community. But what you feel there, and you know, you've all, or many of you at least, not you all, I hadn't, but you see Facebook postings and other images of the cafe. You don't really get to feel their work. The cafe sort of put them on the map, the social media map, if you will, that cafe is wonderful. I was having the most amazing fantasies when I was there. I said to them, I'm going to go right home and meet with David Gamow as soon as I land. I was like, we need this kind of a cafe at East West. And I said to myself, probably not the same and not doable. It's fabulous. But what is really fabulous, and why I'm saying it, is to encourage people. As we all know, Lahari and Biraj are about to start spending half of their life there each year. And they'll be able to serve. The devotees are beautiful, but it is so resonant with Swamiji's energy. They're just doing really beautiful work. So I just felt I had to add that. Anyway, so I guess we'll stop here. Although, as you can see, we could go on and on. We still haven't mentioned many of the places that we went. But does anybody have any comments or questions?
How did you deal with all the monkeys?
Very carefully. At one point, Saiganesh and I were in, it's not quite at the Ganges, but one of these places where rivers keep coming together and eventually become the Ganges. And we had gone in, but remember, there were all of these rains. It had been raining really heavily for weeks, if not months, right before we got there. So this is another thing about the Indian people. They have a sense of everything. They just know everything. You could be 3 miles down the river. They'll sense you and know you're in trouble. It's amazing. And they'll come and save you. It's just uncanny. But these men started speaking to us. They were saying 2 things. You better get out now because the river's going to rise 3 to 4 feet. And then they said to me, hold on to your glasses. I mean, it was, because monkeys love glasses. It's just, and they'll come and they'll take them. They're very aggressive, actually. We were walking at some place, I can't remember where it was, maybe it was the same place, and this woman was getting so upset, and she's like this. I said to Saiganesh, what's going on? He said, the monkey just ran into her kitchen and stole bags of her food. I mean, so you really do need to watch them, actually. Chandra had it. Oh, I'm sorry.
Saiganesh, are you going to lead a pilgrimage?
I don't know why there's an applause for that. I'm not sure yet. You will all hear very soon, within the next month or so, because things need planning. Yeah, if it is so, then it will be towards the end of October next year, but it is still, I'm not yet 100% sure about it. This is not on.
Did everybody hear that, though?
Yeah.
Sounds like everyone else is sure about it.
Yeah. Chandra?
I was wondering if the YSS people were all Indian or were some Americans?
The YSS people that we connected with at Babaji's cave, YSS, as Saiganesh said to me one day, I kept asking him several questions. Finally, he said, Shanti, there's no way to describe their power here. And it's in India, he meant it's true. But anyway, they just sort of, they decided that Babaji's cave was theirs. And so they've taken over the caravan.
She was asking the group with us, were they all just Indian?
They were all Indian. But, yeah. Sure.
So I was just assuming maybe it was some Americans that were...
No, but he started it when he was in India before, I mean, when he came here, he was with Americans, but it was, YSS is all Indian. There are Americans, by the way, I'm saying that, but it's not true. I'm pretty sure that some of the people that Swamiji met after he was there and when he was living in Gurgaon, I could be wrong, I don't know that it matters, but if anybody knows, correct me, that there were Americans living in India who had joined and were a part of YSS. Yeah, so, but it's primarily by an Indian for the Indians.
They're not different from SM. There's just a different name. It's just SRF. It's not, there's no difference between the two. They just have a different name when in India. Yeah, there's no difference. In India, they're called YSS. In the US, it's called SRF. It's exactly the same thing. There is no difference. Atma Jyoti.
Did you get to meditate in Gurgaon, Australia?
In what?
No, the whole ashram where he lived, Nimkar, she asked if we got to meditate in his bedroom. It was all closed, and they said it's still closed because of the pandemic.
Oh, but that's not... the river, the number looks so envious because of the monsoons. I mean, is it clear? I mean, I'm so used to it being, especially in Rishikesh, just crystal clear.
Yeah, we were there during very, very, very heavy monsoons. So it was all brown just because of that.
So when you go, we're going to have to that's the best place to
Yeah.
glass.
We still, yeah, you can still do that.
It was still, I've been in that river there many times actually, but it was still the best place to be dunked and blessed. And believe me, I mean, you know, when you're there, as Lakshmi was trying not to be too graphic, one never knows what will go floating by. But having said that, you're you're oblivious. And
So it's nice.
yeah, right, not as much has been added to the water, you mean? But it was, but still, yeah. You know, the experience that Saiganesh was saying, and I shared this in a letter that I wrote, I went down early one morning to get into the Ganges in Rishikesh, and there were a lot of, you know, there's a lot of Indians in the river early in the morning. It wasn't crazy crowded, but I got in, and immediately this group of women came over, and just, they looked at me, and they looked at me, and then they started splashing me, and they grabbed me, and they dunked me, and then I thought, I'm Indian too, and I was dunking them and splashing them. I mean, it was such an act. You know, they were blessing me, and they felt blessed by me with that water. So, yeah, I mean, in a moment you forget, first of all, how cold it is, but second of all of what might be in it, and most likely is.
Oh, he's just passing by.
I was wondering that I believe you guys were there for 3 weeks or maybe 4 weeks. And that's not too long of a time. And you were saying it was so packed, there were things one after the other. I was curious, how do you find the balance between, you know, things moving so fast, moment after moment, exchanging the overwhelming environment, and then the eternity that you were giving insight?
It's a good question.
How did that work?
That's actually a very good and reasonable question, but I mean, it's a very good question. But you know, Lakshmi was saying it, so I think we've all said it. Honestly, time and place, you know, when I was walking along the road in Sarampur, where Master and Sri Yukteswar used to walk, and you imagine them holding hands, and the Ganges is right there, so they walked up. And I said to myself, life is a dream. But I meant it. Life, like in that moment, I knew it. And in that dream space, because again, how could you imagine that? Time and space really do disappear. So it wasn't like, oh, this experience, then this experience, then this. I think Lakshmi was saying it so beautifully. It's just like the river flowing, and it is truly all one. They quit being just words, you know. It's the experience. Do you want to add anything?
Well, you know, part of what wants to pace and balance in itself is a desire that we have to control. And, you know, in the strangest of ways, India strips that from you, especially when you're in pilgrimage. And that's why you just have to dance with what's happening, and whatever's happening, you have to trust is going to take you where you need to go. It's an art thing, but even just our desire to want to control every experience and how we want to manicure it is sometimes not necessarily in our own best interest.
It's getting late. Just thank people.
I think we will perhaps end here. Of course, you all know where to find any of us. I just wanted to make a brief mention of a few things that are there on the table there. I'll mention. So the blue-green silk piece of thing that you see there like a vest was actually on the idol in Badrinath, on the stone deity. So it was there, and it was given to us by the head priest. And also the orange shawl that you see there was also blessed on the murti. And on this side, some of the things that you see there, I'll talk more about this. I'll send a note to Google Group in the next day or two about Vrindavan and have a separate satsang about it. Those are some of the gifts made by the widows, and so I thought it might be sweet for you to see it. There's some of the handmade lamps that they give to the community in Vrindavan for Diwali, and one of the women there gifted me that fan that she made with her own hands, every piece of it. So just if you want to see any of that. And now, as we conclude our evening, we invite all of you, we have a few things to share with you. So the three of us will offer a blessing. There's water from the Ganges from Rishikesh that Lakshmi will sprinkle on your head as you come up. And then Shanti will bless you with sandalwood paste. This is paste that was actually on the stone idol in Badrinath. The idol is covered in sandalwood paste as a part of the ceremony, and then they take the paste and it's given as prasad. And then I will give you some prasad that you can actually eat. It's basically balls of sugar, popped lotus seeds, and some dried fruits and nuts, in case you're wondering what it is. And if you feel, I would assume it's safe enough to eat, and you're in the US and you'll be fine. But you can decide for yourself. I'm not going to force anybody to subject anybody to it unless you feel ready.
I think we can and should say, as we say every Sunday, for those of you who feel so inclined, it's late, and we're aware that it's late, but we'd be willing to bless you anytime with all of these. These are sacred, the water from the Ganges, everything here is sacred, but if it's late and you feel to leave, please feel comfortable doing that. And if you'd like to come up, then maybe start with Lakshmi. We'll go in that direction.